Welcome to the Climate Lounge, everyone. I'm Birch, and this is our very first episode. Exciting stuff.
I'm Gaia, your co-host for this deep dive. So, get comfy, grab your favorite drink, and let's rewind the clock a bit. Back to 1992 and the Rio Earth Summit.
Back when the world got together in Rio de Janeiro to discuss our planet's future.
Leaders, activists, scientists, all in one place for the UN Conference on Environment and Development.
It wasn't just any old conference, though. It really set things in motion, gave birth to agreements like the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, or UNFCCC.
The UNFCCC. It's really the foundation for international climate action, the blueprint that eventually led to the Paris Agreement.
Which we'll have to cover on another episode.
We definitely will.
It's incredible how forward-thinking they were back then.
Really? They didn't just focus on climate change. They saw the bigger picture, how everything's connected.
Right, like with the Convention on Biological Diversity, which they also signed at Rio.
Highlighting just how crucial biodiversity is for a healthy planet.
And then there's Agenda 21, this massive document.
A roadmap for global sustainable development for the whole 21st century.
You can tell they were serious.
It's mind-blowing, the sheer scope of it. It tackles everything. Poverty, population growth, making cities more sustainable, you name it.
So, let's dive into some of the specifics. See what makes Agenda 21 so relevant. Even today.
Sounds good.
Starting with, well, debt.
Chapter 2. Acknowledge the massive economic hurdles faced by developing countries, especially those burdened by debt.
And it didn't just state the obvious, it proposed solutions.
Right. It urged international cooperation to address those debt burdens, recognizing that sustainable development can't happen when countries are drowning in debt.
It was basically a call for a more just and equitable global financial system, which is still a major issue today.
Absolutely.
And Agenda 21 didn't shy away from pointing fingers either.
Oh, yeah.
Calling out those unsustainable consumption patterns, particularly in developed nations.
They basically said, hey, you guys are consuming way too much, and it's hurting the planet.
It was a bold move to call out those unsustainable patterns, demand a global shift in mindset.
And they didn't let up. This theme of responsible consumption, it pops up throughout Agenda 21.
Now, let's look at Chapter 5. Population dynamics and sustainability.
That was a hot-button issue even back then.
It really was.
But Agenda 21 tackled it head-on, acknowledging the link between population growth and environmental pressures.
It called for more research, integrated policies, a more nuanced understanding of how population dynamics impact our planet.
It also highlighted something we're seeing play out more and more these days. Migration patterns.
As climate change forces people to move.
Climate migration. They were thinking about it back in 1992.
It's like they had a crystal ball.
And
of course, Chapter 6 focuses on the impact of environmental pollution on human health.
Which we understand much better today.
This chapter was ahead of its time. It called for action to reduce health risks from polluted air, water, and land.
And it recognized that pollution often outpaces economic development, especially in newly industrializing nations.
A warning that's sadly playing out today in many parts of the world.
It's a stark reminder that economic growth without environmental safeguards can be devastating.
Exactly. And speaking of development, Chapter 7 was all about sustainable human settlements.
Cities.
Cities, those bustling hubs of activity, were central to Agenda 21.
It called for sustainable urban planning and management, especially in developing countries, where urbanization was happening so rapidly.
And still is. Think about the challenges cities face. Housing, transportation, waste management, they all need environmentally sound solutions.
Especially as urban populations grow.
And Agenda 21 was already urging us to think about those solutions back in '92.
They really were ahead of the curve.
It wasn't just about concrete and steel, though.
Right. It was about quality of life for everyone.
And to achieve that, you need good governance. Which brings us to Chapter 8.
This chapter stressed the need for strong environmental laws and regulations.
This is key. That are actually enforced.
Exactly. What's the point of laws that just gather dust?
Agenda 21 pushed for accountability.
Which we're still struggling with today.
It's amazing. They were already thinking about measuring the environment's role in the economy long before we talked about natural capital.
They really were.
Now, are you ready for a little drama?
Oh, I love drama.
Because one chapter caused quite a stir back in Rio. Chapter 31. on the role of the scientific and technological community.
You'd think that would be pretty straightforward.
Right.
Everyone agrees science is important.
But there were some interesting disagreements.
It was about ethics, the role of ethics in building scientific capacity.
So, what happened?
Well, the Holy See, they weren't happy about the removal of appropriate ethical principles from a section on capacity building.
They argued that ethical considerations should be front and center.
Absolutely.
What did the committee say to that?
The committee chairman argued that other principles were at play, not just ethics.
So, they adopted the text, but with the Holy See's concerns noted.
It's a compromise.
Exactly, which just shows how complex international diplomacy can be, even in a document aiming for global consensus.
It's never black and white.
So much negotiation, so much diplomacy to reach these agreements.
A lot of work goes on behind the scenes.
Speaking of agreements, what about the legacy of Rio and Agenda 21? What did all that effort actually achieve?
Well, it wasn't just about the agreements themselves. It was about changing the conversation, about laying the groundwork for the future of climate action.
And that legacy, we see it today in the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement, even how businesses are embracing sustainability.
It all goes back to those discussions in Rio.
Agenda 21 might seem like ancient history.
In some ways.
But its themes are so relevant.
It reminds us that this journey toward a sustainable future, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
It takes commitment, collaboration, and a willingness to adapt.
And most importantly, we're all in this together.
We each have a role to play in shaping a world where both people and the planet can thrive.
I love that.
So, what stood out to you most about the Rio Convention and Agenda 21? What surprised you?
That's a good question.
We'll continue exploring these themes after a quick break. Don't go away.
So Agenda 21, it was ambitious.
It was.
But it wasn't just some wish list. It was packed with recommendations on how to actually achieve sustainable development.
Let's unpack some of those.
Okay.
What about trade?
Yes. Agenda 21 recognized the role of international trade in economic development, but it also emphasized the need for trade policies that don't harm the environment.
So finding that balance between growth and sustainability.
Exactly. Making sure trade isn't just about exploiting resources, people.
Right.
And remember those debt burdens.
Yeah.
Agenda 21 called for solutions that wouldn't stifle growth, especially in developing nations.
It recognized the need for debt relief.
And innovative financing mechanisms.
To support sustainable development.
Yeah, exactly.
It seemed like Agenda 21 was really sensitive to the challenges faced by developing countries. Did it offer any specific support?
Oh, definitely. Capacity building was a huge focus.
What do you mean by capacity building?
Well, things like supporting public administration, strengthening financial institutions, improving tax systems.
Basically, giving them the tools and knowledge to manage their resources sustainably.
Exactly.
It's fascinating how Agenda 21 connected all these different issues.
It's true. It offered a holistic view of sustainable development.
Like trade, debt, governance.
It recognized that they're all interconnected.
You can't address them in isolation.
Oh.
What about the role of women?
Oh, Agenda 21 acknowledged that too.
In what way?
It recognized the vital role women play in sustainable development, especially as consumers.
Interesting.
They saw the potential of women's purchasing power to drive change.
And it emphasized their involvement in environmental initiatives.
Absolutely.
Empowering women as agents of change.
Which is great to see.
Now, population growth. That's always a tricky topic.
It is.
How did Agenda 21 approach it?
It didn't shy away from it. It acknowledged the link between population dynamics and sustainable development and called for integrated population policies.
So not just focusing on limiting population growth.
Right, but managing it sustainably.
For both people and the planet.
Exactly.
It even called for policies addressing the links between population trends, resource use, and technology.
They were thinking ahead.
They really were.
Like with human settlements, Agenda 21 really stressed the need for sustainable cities.
Especially in developing countries.
Where urbanization was happening so fast.
It still is?
It's all about creating cities that are livable, resilient, and sustainable.
Did it get into specifics? What kind of actions did it recommend?
Lots of things, like establishing national population policies, promoting women's participation in society, increasing female literacy rates, ensuring equal access to education and healthcare.
Wow.
It was all about empowering countries to take charge of their own sustainable development.
And it recognized the importance of indigenous knowledge, too.
Absolutely. Indigenous peoples have been stewards of the environment for generations.
We have so much to learn from them.
It's about respecting diverse perspectives.
Finding solutions that work for everyone.
Exactly.
Now, we talked about the health concerns related to pollution.
Right.
Did Agenda 21 offer any solutions there?
It did. It proposed actions to mitigate those risks. Things like preventative health care.
Especially for women.
Especially for women. And accessible reproductive health care.
Taking a holistic approach to health.
Recognizing all the interconnected factors.
Social, economic, environmental.
Exactly.
And to tackle those urban challenges, too.
Like improving sanitation and waste management.
Especially in developing countries.
Right. They even set specific goals, like access to safe drinking water and sanitation for everyone by 2025.
Which is a goal we're still working towards.
It shows how much work is left to be done.
Especially in rapidly growing cities.
Where resources are stretched thin.
It's a constant race against time.
Trying to keep up with the needs of a growing population, while ensuring those services are sustainable.
And that's where innovation comes in.
Yes.
Agenda 21 highlighted the importance of technology.
For tackling environmental challenges.
Investing in research and development.
Finding new and better ways to do things.
And sharing those advancements globally.
Through technology transfer.
So we're all on the same page.
It's a reminder that we're all in this together.
A sustainable future requires collaboration.
And knowledge sharing.
On a global scale.
It all comes back to that core vision of Agenda 21. Economic development and environmental protection going hand in hand.
It was a bold vision.
And we're still working towards it.
But Agenda 21 laid the foundation for so much progress.
It shows that even with all the challenges, there's hope.
As long as we keep striving for a better future.
Keep innovating, collaborating, and learning from each other.
We can create a world where both people and the planet can flourish.
So we talked about Agenda 21's goals.
Yeah, big picture stuff.
But it also highlighted some key tools for actually achieving those goals.
Like?
Environmentally sound technologies.
Not just reducing our negative impact.
Right. It's about finding innovations that help us live more sustainably.
And it emphasized technology transfer.
Especially to developing countries.
So they're not left behind.
Exactly.
As we transition to a more sustainable future.
Everyone should have access to those advancements.
Did Agenda 21 get into the specifics? The practical steps for implementation?
Oh, yeah. It talked about capacity building, investing in education, training, institutional development.
Especially in developing countries.
Especially there.
So, empowering people to manage their resources sustainably.
Right. It also stressed the importance of partnerships
between
governments, businesses, civil society organizations.
Because these challenges, they're complex.
You can't solve them alone.
It takes everyone working together.
Exactly.
Agenda 21 also talked about data.
Data collection. So we can track our progress.
Measure our impact. Make informed decisions.
It's about accountability.
Making sure we're actually doing what we say we'll do.
And that data, it can't be hidden away.
It needs to be accessible.
For everyone.
Not just scientists and policymakers. Transparency is key.
If we want people to buy in, they need to see the results.
So, public awareness, education.
Huge parts of Agenda 21.
Empowering people to make informed choices.
To be active participants.
Not just bystanders.
Right.
And it called for integrating sustainability.
Yeah.
Into education. At all levels.
Starting young.
It's about shaping the values.
Yeah.
Of future generations.
Giving them a sense of responsibility.
For the planet.
Exactly.
Now, some people might be wondering, is Agenda 21 still relevant today?
It's a good question.
It was adopted a while ago?
Back in 1992.
But the core principles, they're still relevant.
Like the idea of sustainable development.
Meeting our needs today without compromising the future.
Exactly.
And that environmental protection.
Yeah.
In economic development, they're not mutually exclusive.
They're two sides of the same coin.
We need both.
Both thrive.
Now, Agenda 21 itself, it's not legally binding.
Right.
But it's been incredibly influential.
It served as a blueprint for so many sustainability initiatives.
So it's had a real impact.
Absolutely. It's inspired action.
On climate change, biodiversity, sustainable consumption and production.
It's about people coming together to create a better future.
Working towards a common goal.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up, This deep dive into the Rio Convention and Agenda 21, what are the key takeaways?
I think the biggest one is that we're all part of this.
This effort to build a sustainable world.
It's not about perfection. It's about taking small steps.
Day after day.
Year after year.
And remembering those who came before us.
They laid the groundwork
For the progress we see today.
Agenda 21 is a reminder of their vision, their hope.
It's a call to action.
For all of us.
To play our part.
No matter how small.
Making conscious choices.
Supporting sustainable businesses.
Advocating for change.
Every action counts.
Well said.
Yeah.
So, as we sign off from the Climate Lounge today, what should our listeners do?
Learn more about Agenda 21. See how its principles are being applied today.
It's amazing how much it's still shaping our world.
It really is.
And remember, this is just the beginning of our Climate Lounge journey.
We'll be back next week
with another deep dive
into a fascinating climate topic.
So stay curious, stay engaged,
keep those climate conversations going,
and don't forget to subscribe and share Climate Lounge with your friends.
This podcast was created by SD Garcia, a student of international climate negotiations at Washington University in St. Louis,
and produced by the Greenlight District.
Thanks for listening.
Until next time.
you.